Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, we do it every few weeks, every couple of weeks, and we love it. Nick Wright stops by for about an hour. We'll chop it up. First things first, my friend, all that stuff. So, I was going to start with this. I'm not a traditionalist. I didn't go to church as a kid. I'm agnostic. I grew up rurally. I wasn't in your classic suburb. My mom was British in a rural town where there was no British people, especially ones with strong accents. And I've always been a bit of a loner. So I'm not a traditionalist. I don't cling to stuff. Right?
Okay.
And so when the Pac-12, my favorite college football conference, or the Seattle Sonics left, I had people that were like, how are you not furious? And I said with the Pac-12, USC gets $30 million annually from the Pac-12 TV deal. They're going to get $85 million annually from the Big Ten. If I can tell you, you're going to triple your income and do the exact same thing, you'd take the job. You wouldn't be loyal to the calendar or your boss. You'd take the job. So I am not a traditionalist. And so I can think two things at once. I can love something, but move off it instantly. And I think about this with the people who bang on the NBA. The NBA load management drives me frickin' nuts. I think it's terrible business. I literally have made decisions in the regular season. I'm going to watch a game, and I'm like, oh, Giannis isn't playing. I'm going to go have dinner with my wife.
That's correct.
I've literally moved.
Sure.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I'm like, oh, KD's not playing?
Yep.
Well, I'm not watching the Suns.
That's right.
So I always think, what about a kid that goes to 2 NBA games a year? And he's at that game. So it's funny, but I also, one of the things I don't like about the internet is that there's a lot of bad actors. It is okay to criticize the NBA for that, but know that Amazon's going to pay him a fortune. NBC and TNT are in a bidding war, and they're going to double the revenue the league brings in. And oh, by the way, the playoffs have been absolutely riveting.
The playoffs have been electric.
Amazing.
Electric.
LA. And then, by the way, this is the first round.
First round.
This is the round you can look past. So my take on, I never mind people who are pushback, contrarian. But I do feel you and I are pretty honest about, yeah, I was either wrong, or I can literally think two things. Load management pisses me off, and the NBA is great. It's just not great in January.
Well, and things everything has become, it feels so tribal that it is, everything is the way a diehard fan of a specific sports team, the way a diehard fan of Alabama football roots for Alabama football is basically how a huge percentage of people deal with every aspect of their life. I fucking love it, so everything about it is correct, and anyone criticizing it is wrong, as opposed to any type of, I love this, didn't like this is good, this is bad. Anyone that acts as if the NBA, folks who've been like, NBA's dying, that is, it's obviously not true. Anybody, though, acting as if that there aren't aspects to the overwhelming and what is about to be under the new TV deal, $100 million a year contracts that complicate a lot of the day-to-day factors of the league, they're being intellectually dishonest, in my opinion. I do think, and I maybe have mentioned this to you, I know I mentioned it on my pod, but I do think the NBA made a strategic error this season. So I'm going to I'm going to do a Colin Cowherd in a bit. I'm going to give an anecdote or a story. It'll get there. So a guy who, I'm sure, Connor Shell. So, he, used to it was a big executive at ESPN, helped start 30 for 30s. Now he runs a company of his own. Oddly, his father and my mom worked together when I was a little kid. So I knew Connor as a little kid. And I never really knew exactly what his dad did, and maybe I'm wrong, but as a little kid, what it was described to me as, he was in charge of long-term strategy, meaning like when Sprint came out with a new phone, his job would be like, okay, when this phone is bordering on obsolete, how are we going to sell the last 100 of them? You know what I mean? Like long-term thinking.
Sure.
And I think the NBA needed someone in that role 18 months ago to say, guys, here is all of NBA history and ages of guys on their last playoff run. Is it on the board that we just had the final LeBron deep playoffs, Steph deep playoffs, Durant deep playoffs? These guys, is it possible, in fact, overwhelmingly likely, that one, two, or all of them aren't going to be around when the calendar turns to May? If so, is it worthwhile for us to take a short-term regular season ratings hit by featuring the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Minnesota Timberwolves, these teams to prime the audience that this is where our league's going? And they didn't do that. Instead, it was Warriors, Lakers, Suns, these guys. So I do wonder if this second round of the playoffs, when you have Nuggets, Timberwolves, and when you have Thunder, maybe Mavs, if people are going to see a ratings dip, it won't affect the new TV contract, all of that, but because the audience doesn't know, this is their league now. Colin, if the Bucks lose this series, they're down 3-2, and if the Clippers lose this series, the oldest star player left in the playoffs is
Luka.
No, not Luka. Kyrie is Kyrie, who's 30, just turned 32. Everyone will be gone. Like Joker, who's 28 or 29, will be like the third oldest star left. The Clippers are all old guys. They're I think, going to lose. The Lakers are already out. The Warriors didn't make it. The Suns are out. The Bucks are on the brink. Like, this is a massive storming of the gates of the 20-somethings, but everyone should have expected it. When Kobe Bryant's last playoff game ever, he was 32. Michael Jordan was 35. Like, you guys don't play. People saw what LeBron did, so they thought Steph and Durant and Kawhi and Paul George are going to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. Steph and KD already exceeded age expectations. So I think the NBA made a mistake there. I also think my favorite 2 months of the year are the NBA playoffs. My favorite 20 days of the year are my 20 NFL Sundays, and my favorite 2 months of the year are the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Last weekend, the draft and the NBA playoffs is the best non-NFL weekend of the year by far. I didn't leave my place the whole damn weekend. I was just draft playoffs,
so good.
Draft playoffs. It was so good. So it's 2024, and let's talk about something really, really important. If you're ever injured, check out Morgan & Morgan. It's America's largest injury law firm, and they are there for you. Over 100 offices nationwide. Think about that. More than 1,000 lawyers with over $20 billion, that's a B, $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients. Things happen in life unexpectedly. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is really, really easy. Like, winning in the NFL is hard. We know that quarterbacking in the NFL is hard. Submitting a claim is easy. You're ever injured? Check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial #law from your cell phone. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting for you to get a full and fair compensation if there's an unexpected accident in your life. And I've had a few. The one thing about the NBA, I know leagues wish it was true, but it's not. There's been this sense that, market size doesn't matter because players can get rich in Oklahoma City or New Orleans. Right. Just like a guy in Boise can make more than everybody in New York if he has a deal with McDonald's, like to produce their French fries, which for a long time was
Oh, that's actually that's a guy. Oh, I thought you were making that up. That's actually a guy. A guy in Idaho had the McDonald's contract or whatever. Okay, got it. Go ahead.
Yeah, for a long time, the richest guy in Boise was richer than the richest guy in New York, right? So, but I'll push back on markets do matter. First, the players do want to play in your Miamis, your LAs. It's a winter league. There's a history. Players don't choose Milwaukee. The second thing, I'm going to go back to the first NBA game I remember watching. So when I was a little kid, I would cut out pictures. There was a board by my bedroom, almost styrofoam. My dad put up there. You could put needles and posters on it. And Elmore Smith was a 6'9" Lakers center. And I started putting sports stuff up. I remember Elmore Smith was the first one I put up. And then there was overtime. He was a Lakers center back when the Lakers, like Wilt and pre all this. Yeah, I think it was around that time, or may have been post Wilt, pre Wilt, whatever.
It would have been, for your age, it would have been post Wilt, right. Yeah, but go ahead. Showtime.
Yeah. It was 70s. Like early 70s. Yep. So I go back and I look at the biggest stars in the league. So when I first watched, it was either Jerry West or Wilt.
Yeah.
Los Angeles. And then it was, after that, very quickly, Dr. J, Philadelphia.
Yeah. And by the way, Dr. J, New Jersey in the ABA. You know, it might as well be New York Metro.
Okay. So it was Jerry West, LA, Jerry and Wilt. It was old Wilt. And then it was Dr. J. And then the league went through a little while there. It didn't really have a star. And then it was LA Magic, Boston Bird, MJ Chicago, Shaq and Kobe LA, LeBron outlier Cleveland, Jordan Chicago, right? Steph San Francisco. LeBron is the only face of the league in a small market. Now, Cleveland has always played bigger because they have such a rich history with all their sports. It may be losing, but the Cleveland Browns are like the Cincinnati Reds, right? Like kind of a bedrock franchise. So that this idea that markets don't matter, and the reason I say this is the danger for the NBA, and they've got their money, is Denver, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Indiana, that Jalen Brunson with like a KD, we may not have a face of the league coming up, but they will become the franchise.
Listen, people have been, the New York Knicks have not won a title since 1973. The New York Knicks have been to 2 finals in the last 50 years. And one of them, they got their heads handed to them in the lowest rated season ever. First season post Jordan, lockout year, 50 games. And yet they are, over that same time frame, top 5 most talked about team. You are seeing it right now. The fan base is rabid. You have a disproportionate amount of media members who care about the team or root for the team or whatever. Yes. They are dying for this team to matter, dying for it to matter in a way that is, there are some similarities to like what the football media does with the Cowboys and what basketball media does with the Knicks, except the Cowboys, at least in my lifetime, had a dynasty and have had multiple good teams with no great teams. The Knicks have only had a handful of good teams, no championships, and only really came close once ever in 94. And so I think your point on market size is multi-layered in a lot of ways. I think that guys will always, young, rich, usually single guys, are just also going to want to go cool places and live somewhere awesome. And that is, and again, I'm from Kansas City and I love Kansas City. But if I were 24 with 30 million, it would suck. Like you know what I mean? Yeah. We're blessed that Mahomes was like, I'll buy a piece of the Royals. My wife will buy a soccer team. And you know what I mean? We'll just basically become king and queen of the city. Or else you can outgrow it. Also, football, you don't have to be there as long as you have to be there during the year as basketball and baseball. I think this Knicks run is important for the league. I do think that. And I think there is.
So do I.
And I think that your point on if they were to get a Durant, and it wouldn't even have to. The thing is this: Jalen Brunson scored 40 in 3 straight games. I did not. I'll tell you. Nobody did. So I'll tell you a funny story. Let me turn this light on, see if my lighting is a little bit better. I know it's a little dark where I am. Sorry about that. I should turn it on before. So I was at Philly Knicks game 4 in Philly. So and I was very fortunate. I had amazing seats. So I'm basically right between the Knicks bench and the scorers table where they and there's row 1 courtside, row 2 courtside, feet on the wood, and then row AA, which is the first row that isn't feet on the wood. So that's where I am. In between the first and the second quarter, Rick Brunson, Jalen's dad, who's a coach on the Knicks, sees me. And he's like, hey, you owe my son an apology. And he's smiling when he says it. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you know what I mean. You owe him an apology. And I think it was because when they signed him, because there's a clip that Nick's Twitter put out of everyone who was wrong about Jalen. When they signed him, I'm like, listen, he's a nice player. But if he's your third best, I think what I said was if he's your third best guy, you can win a title. If he's your second best guy, you can be good. And if he's your best guy, you're not a good team. It was what I thought. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it just
the whole league.
Right.
Did.
I don't think it was a terrible take. It ended up being. And so I'm like, I've already said I was wrong. He was like, you need to say it on TV. And I'm like, buddy, I had him 4th on my MVP ballot. Now, I don't actually have a ballot per se, but when I list them on the show, and so he's like, oh, okay, cool. But you know how I talk. I talk like this with my hands. He's kind of similar. His back is to the court. He has now walked like right to the scorer's table, and I've stood up to talk to him. So we're not like nose to nose, but we're leaning in, having, a very friendly, great conversation. Second quarter's about to start. One of the refs jogs over and pats him on the shoulder and is like, hey, do we need to kick that guy out? Thought he and I were arguing. And Rick, to his credit, started laughing. He's like, no, I think he even said that's my buddy, which is nicer than I deserved. He was like, no, we're cool. And then the ref maybe recognized me and like realized everything was fine. But in the moment, I was like, oh man, that would have been the ultimate power move by him if he'd have said to the ref, in fact, yeah, you know why you're getting kicked out? Because 3 years ago, you were wrong about my kid. Now you're out of here. That doesn't really answer your question. But yes, the Knicks being great, it's also why, here's another kind of spin-off to that take. How awful are Brooklyn Nets fans? You had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden. No one cared. No one in the city cared. Like, it was like the Knicks have one guy and a team that plays so hard, and they are infiltrating Philadelphia. The tickets are $600 to get in. The Nets were on deep playoff runs against Giannis. And people were like, do I want to go to Barclays in Brooklyn? It's unbelievable.
You know what? Well, you know what it is? It shows you the power of brand.
It's the Clippers, Lakers, but go ahead. Yeah.
The late John Madden, Eric Shanks has brought this up before. John Madden was the only football broadcaster of note that literally moved a rating.
Yeah.
Now, sports gambling now moves ratings.
Sure.
People don't leave bad games. You can see it. So we know that if you have money on games, and as the rollout of legalized gambling happens in America, it's helping television. Yep. People have more vested financially, they stay in games. But John Madden was the first and maybe only broadcaster to do that. And he always had a theory. Say the game out loud. Does it sound like a big game? And he said, when you say Packers-Niners, oh, that's got to be a big football game. They could both be 4-6. It feels like a big, what the New York Knicks have always felt big, even when they stunk the last 20 years. If the Knicks, here's all you need to know. Jordan goes there. Kobe goes there. It felt big to them. They could be 12 games under 500. Michael Jordan and Kobe, it was like, I'm going to New York. I'm going to put on a show. So New York just is. It just feels big.
100%. So speaking of that branding, this is unrelated, but you want to play a game real quick? So the Chiefs host obviously the opening game of the year. So we know who their 8 opponents are. I did a thing on the air today where I said, I think I know what game the NFL is going to put there. So let me tell you who the opponents are and see where you land on it. And I'll tell you
for the opener.
Thursday night, first game of the year. Last year was Chiefs Lions, right? So your 8 possible opponents are obviously Chargers, Raiders, Broncos, your 3 divisional opponents. Your NFC opponents are Bucks, Saints, and your AFC non-divisional opponents are Ravens, Texans, Bengals. Now let me give you one piece of info. NFL's been doing this, Super Bowl champion host for, the opener for 20 years. Only once have they made it a divisional matchup. So the NFL kind of tells us they tend not to, because Chiefs Chargers, like Harbaugh's opener or whatever.
Well, my first guess was the last time we saw Jim coach, he won the national championship at Michigan. Yeah. And I thought Mahomes and Michigan's brand, I would guess Chargers.
But if the NFL doesn't want to do divisional, because again, 19 of 20 years they've gone non-divisional. So if it's not, because I think the Chargers one is interesting.
So give me the non-divisional teams again.
Bucks, Saints, Texans, Bengals, Ravens. Last year it was Chiefs Lions.
I think it's going to be Texans.
Yes. Me too. So do you want to say why you think it, or you want to hear from me?
Well, because the Lions were the team. It was a good story. Losing team looks like they're going to be really good. So you got the champions and this ascending young team with this brand that's well known. The Texans dysfunctional, they pop up. There's a sense they're ascending brand. And also the Lions won that game. So that game is so big for the Lions and so big for the Texans. There's a possible upset in week 1.
And so this is in wrestling. I think, I don't know what the parlance is, but sometimes when they're trying to make someone a star, they make sure they have a game against the established star, and and that's how they get over. There you go. So I think Bucks and Saints are basically impossible. There's no chance that's the opening game. Obviously, Raiders, Broncos are not going to happen. There's no quarterback. Chargers would work, but it's divisional. So now we're down to 3, in my opinion. Ravens, Bengals, Texans. The reason I said I don't think they'll do Ravens is because if the season starts with the Ravens having added Derrick Henry, coming off this great year, losing to the Chiefs again, it's going to kind of make the AFC feel like, all right. You know what I mean? Like what? Like if the Chiefs start the year beating Baltimore, then how many games in a row would they have to lose before people are like they're in trouble? You know what I mean? So I don't think it's going to be Baltimore. Joe Burrow, unfortunately, multiple years now has been dinged heading into the first week of the year. He's also coming off that surgery. I think they want that to be like later in the year marquee. Then you have the Texans, who, if they lose, no one's going to write them off. If they win, it's a catapult. It's the NFL kind of being like telling you, hey, this is the team to watch. CJ Stroud, all of it. They weren't on national TV at all last year. So I know it sounds weird. I feel almost convinced it's going to be Chiefs Texans to open the NFL season. It just makes the most sense.
Yes. And I think what you said is the NBA didn't do this. The NFL's doing it. Here's the next potential star. Meet them.
Or the next, they did with the Lions last year. They told America, the Lions hadn't even made the playoffs. They told America, you need to take this team seriously. Like this is and they won. And they ended up winning. It was an electric game and all of it.
Okay. So one of my favorite things to do, I don't think I'm a contrarian, but I think what I am, and this is probably not a good quality, I'm a bit of a cynic.
Okay.
I'm agnostic. I'm not real religious. Prove it to me. I want data. But I don't go off into the weeds. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But one of the things I hear all the time, and I really led with it today, and I just felt so strongly about it. It probably shouldn't have been in my opening block, but I felt strongly about it, is there's this thing out there. I'm a big believer you have to take big swings in life if you're confident in yourself, because if it lands, it changes your life. And if it doesn't, yeah, you refinance your mortgage, you figure out, if you make a big,
You
if you
can
miss on
recover.
something in real estate, but you'll recover. If you really have confidence in your intellect, your stability, and your ascension as a human being, you're fine. So there's always this talk about, dead cap. That dead cap money's a killer. The Rams were $80 million over the cap last year and made the playoffs, and were a bad call on Puka Nacua from making the NFC Championship. Why? McVay's great. Stafford's great. Tom Brady was a $35 million dead cap hit for the Bucs last year. They made the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers was a $40 million dead cap hit for the Packers. They routed the Cowboys and gave the Niners a real battle on the way to the NFC Championship. Philadelphia 2021, the Carson Wentz contract. Ooh, how punitive. No, they drafted Jalen Hurts and they've been just fine. Is that there's this myth, the Kirk Cousins contract. If Bo Nix can play, Denver's fine. They're absolutely fine.
Are you talking about the Russell Wilson contract right now? Okay, got it.
So you look at it and you go, oh my God, if Bo Nix can play, he's essentially free for 4 years. And I think he will work. He completed 77% of his college passes against like the best Pac-12 has been in my lifetime. So my point is, there are, and I say this, Atlanta, this is why I defended Atlanta. Atlanta said, what you don't want to be is last year, the Vikings had to make a trade to get Josh Dobbs.
So
Atlanta's going, listen, Ritter was terrible. Cousins is the best on the market. At 8, we think we can get a quarterback, but we don't know. And by the time they got to 8, they did get calls from other people, and they thought, screw it. What if Kirk comes back and he's okay? And by Thanksgiving, we're like, Penix is way better in practice. So my take was, it is viewed as terrible, but it's a heavily weighted contract early. If you had to move off Kirk after a year and Penix is great, that's like rich people complaining about taxes. That is the best problem to have in the NFL.
So I understand what you're saying, but I actually don't. I think that what you said at the beginning is the opposite of what they did. I don't look at this as a big swing. I look at this as the ultimate hedge. I look at this as a team that post Matt Ryan has been in quarterback hell and said never again. Never again. And instead of, in my opinion, giving yourself the best chance to be great, you lowered your ceiling because you wanted to make sure the floor didn't bottom out. Because you to use both, you had 2 massive assets, your cap space and the 8th pick. They used them both on the same spot where only one guy can play. So if you really, and I don't think, here's the other thing, because I am a bit of a contract nerd as far as the fact that they structured Kirk's contract the way they did, where instead of guaranteeing the salary, they put it in signing bonus. You could have given him the same amount of guaranteed money, but made it easier to trade him in a year. And they gave him a fucking no trade clause. So I don't think when they signed him 7 weeks ago, they thought they were drafting a quarterback. And if you really had the courage of your convictions in Penix, now maybe you're worried he's not going to be there, but I don't think a lot of people thought Penix wasn't going to be there at 8, then use that money to make the rest of your team better. I think Atlanta was so scarred by Desmond Ritter that they're like, we're never going through that again. Like, we're just not.
And I don't, for the record, I was so scarred from divorce, I'm never getting divorced again. There are times in life, by the way, being awful at quarterback, Jay Glazer always says this, it is the most miserable thing in the league.
Correct. So and why did Raheem Morris? Raheem Morris was a coaching, hotshot's the wrong word, but like the youngest coach in the league. Like on this, what happened? He never got quarterback.
No quarterback.
And so then for a decade, he's grinding himself back. And I think he's probably like, never again. Never again. Like, I'm going to give myself a floor at that spot. So I understand that. And maybe I'm spoiled because the team I root for is competing for championships. I'm not even being a smartass.
And it's been And the Chiefs and the Packers for most of my life have at least been B to B plus at quarterback.
The Chiefs never had the guy, but they had Trent Green, they had Alex. They weren't
Yes.
terrible except for a few years. But I'd like, man, if you're a Falcons fan, try to go be great. If you sign Kirk, I'll tell you, somebody asked me today who I thought won the draft, right? So I'm going to give you a wild take on that.
Okay.
I think you can make an argument the Giants won the draft because New England didn't take their trade. It's reported yesterday that the Giants offered 6 and next year's number 1 for the 3rd pick. And I'm like, oh, so they hoped to draft Drake May at 3, not add any weapons in the first round to trade the pick, and have Drake May, a 21-year-old with high upside, but who was erratic at North Carolina, put him behind that offensive line with those weapons. Guess what? I think that had they done that, they'd be drafting number 1 next year, and they'd be sending it to New England like Carolina just did. Like the fact that the Giants now have next year's number 1 this year, maybe Drew Lock plays, maybe Daniel Jones plays, but at least he has a weapon. And then next year you try to go find your quarterback. That, I think New England turning that trade down was a mistake they'll regret. I think that you could have gone to 6, gotten Giants number 1 next year, and at 6, we know Minnesota's willing to give you 11 and 23, so you could have had 11 and 23 to add players, your first rounder and the Giants' first rounder next year, start Jacoby for a season, and then that's what I would have done if I were New England. But New England's GM was auditioning for his job. He doesn't even have it yet, and the owner said, I want a quarterback, so I guess he's going to draft a quarterback.
Well, I had an executive in the league said, if you're the Giants, you are rooting for Bryce Young and Will Levis, because then the only other team that's guaranteed to take a quarterback is the Raiders.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody said, he said to me,
well, that's
you are
a great
rooting
point.
for Will Levis to hit and Bryce Young to hit if you're the Giants, because then it's like us and the Raiders need quarterbacks, and there'll be 2 good prospects. Shedeur Sanders, the kid Cam Ward at Miami, who's pretty interesting. There's a kid, Notre Dame got a transfer who's pretty interesting.
No, and Quinn Ewers, people like him, and then there's one more that we're forgetting. That's the guy who's most likely to go number 1. I talked about it on the show today, so I see if I can remember it. But I was just about to look like, hold on a second, who are the teams that could
Raiders, Titans.
Oh, Carson Giants. Beck is the other one, the kid from Georgia that people
I don't think he's a top 5 pick. I think he's he's Georgia good.
I think you're probably right. But if you look at, I was going to look through the NFL, like teams that, Buffalo, no. Miami, no. The Jets are a maybe if Aaron gets hurt. If Aaron gets hurt, you know what I mean? The Jets are a maybe. New England, no. Baltimore. Cleveland is a maybe. I don't know what that's a rough spot, man. But Pittsburgh's a maybe. So there's a bunch of maybes, but there's not a lot of definites. To your point, because everybody, when 6 quarterbacks go in round 1, everybody thinks they have a quarterback. You know what I mean? Like there's just you mentioned. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and they'll at least give those quarterbacks till Thanksgiving of the 2nd year. And so this executive said, the bottom line, if you're the Giants, he said, I don't think Will Levis is going to work. He said, I think Bryce will. He liked Bryce. He said, listen, Bryce is talented. He's not as big as you'd like, but they got him weapons. They got him a really good wide receiver. He's like, Bryce will move the chains. They'll stick with him. But he said, the Giants and the Raiders, that's it. That you're absolutely, and they're neither one's going to be any good. He said, so those are your top 2 potential picks.
And for one of those teams, Tom Brady will probably play for him, so they won't need. He wants to play football so badly. Like I get it. I don't blame him. Did you see LeBron's quote? LeBron had a quote after the game that I thought was so fascinating. It was also almost a little sad. And it made me think of Brady to a degree, where LeBron said, I think to Dave McMenamin, along the lines of, I'm never going to be bad. But at some point I'm going to have to stop. And he basically said, like, I'm not chasing anything anymore. I've accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. But at some point I've got to stop playing. And it was such a unique thing because I watched it. I'm like, yeah, he's never going to be, never's a long time, obviously, but I think 5 years from now, LeBron would be good. I do. You know what I mean? Right now, what is he? At best, the 6th best player in the league, and at worst, the 12th best player in the league. He's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's better, in my opinion, clearly than Devin Booker, and Devin Booker's an all-NBA guy.
He led the NBA in fourth quarter buckets and playoff buckets.
Right. And so and he played 71 games. So it's such a unique spot for LeBron, which is like most guys get forced out. Most guys, you know what I mean? They have they're averaging 5 points a game. So he's not going to be that. So at some point, he's just going to have to be like, I guess I'm done. I'm stopping. And that's kind of what happened with Tom. Like, I understand the Bucks were not good Tom's last year, but the year before he almost won MVP. He still threw for a million yards.
He's better than half the quarterbacks today. Easily.
No question. And he just stopped. And I understand there was family stuff he's dealing with. I get it. But I think every time someone puts a microphone in front of him, he clearly is like, God damn it, I want to play football. I miss playing football. And he's going to be with Fox and calling games, and maybe that'll scratch the itch. But it also might make him watch these guys and be like, God dog it, I'm better than that guy. And so like it's a weird spot. We're seeing 2 guys, LeBron nearing the end and Brady who just ended, who played longer than anybody ever in the history of their field and at a higher level than anyone ever thought, who both, Brady already had to and LeBron's going to have to. We're going to have to oddly make the decision of like, I guess I just should stop because I'm old, but I'm not bad. And it's such a weird thing. Like people are like, oh, John Elway went out on top. John Elway went out winning Super Bowls, but he was not good anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I'm not disrespecting John, but like he was a shell of the player that he was. Peyton Manning went out winning a Super Bowl, was 9 touchdowns, 17 picks that year, was a shell. Even the guys who go out on top are usually not good anymore. So I don't know. You know what I mean? Brady seems to still miss it. I don't know what LeBron's going to do.
I'll tell you, Brady is, I'll probably get in trouble saying this, but Brady, his preparation for broadcasting at Fox, dude, he's in the building.
Oh, you're not going to
He was in the building
today. You're not going to get in trouble for saying that. I think they love
He was in the building today. The next 3 days, he's in the building practicing. Like Brady is as obsessed about this. People don't understand.
Oh, I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be great because he's competitive. I think I think the key to so much of this is competitive. And I think that there is Tom had, and I don't know Tom at all, but he had recently in the last year, he did an interview and he was talking about during the game and was basically about how like he hated who he was playing against. Like he would build up an anger and like the real like froth because he's competitive. And now I think he's going to look around and be like, I need to be better. And it helps that most of the other people in his spot are quarterbacks too. I need to be better than Troy. I need to be better than Tony. I know Collinsworth's not a quarterback, but I think he's going to want to be considered the best. And there was always, you remember, God, it feels like a lifetime ago, but when Deflategate happened and Tom unfairly had his text messages leaked, and the text message to I think it was his dad, maybe it was his friend, about Peyton, and they were talking about back and forth, and Tom said, he's like, yeah, but I'm going to play 5 more years and Peyton's done, and then it's not even going to be a debate. And by the way, he was right about that. That's exactly what happened. But I also think there's like a competitiveness with Peyton, which is Peyton's a broadcaster. You know what I mean? And everybody, unlike some of the other broadcasters, none of the Blooms, everybody, I think that broadcast is great. People love it. I think he's going to be like, I'm going to crush these guys.
Yeah.
I really do. So I bet he's going to be awesome. Awesome.
Um, I tell my kids, they're tired of hearing it, but I always say, there's certain traits in people that are really important, and it's not where you went to school. One of the things that's really important is resilience. Don't be fragile. You're going to have shitty days. You're going to have horrible relationships. Don't be fragile. These people on the internet go sideways and upside down because somebody said something they don't like. You better get over it. Don't be fragile. Be mobile, be willing to move. But the other thing I tell my kids all the time is in life, you will compete against yourself. I will never compete against Elon Musk or probably a ditch digger. I'll compete against people in my sphere, intellectually, emotionally. I'll be competing against me, right? Like I'm not going to neuroscience. I'm not going to be competing against those people, and probably not against dog walkers, right? Like I know where I'm competing against, and I think so. I think what my point is, if you're competing, it's almost life's like boxing.
You're in your weight class. That's right.
You're competing essentially in life against yourself.
So Wilds made fun of me for this, and maybe I said this to you already on a podcast. If not, I don't care. I'll say it again because I truly feel this way, which is I just said kind of flippantly to Wilds once about a different broadcaster. I was like, oh, they're one of my rivals. And he's like, what do you mean? Like you have a bad relationship with him? I'm like, no, I've never met him. He's like, you just said they're your rival. I'm like, well, they're on the national scene and they're about my age. I must be more successful than them. And he was like, you're insane, buddy. I'm like, no. I was like, everybody has this. And he was adamant, no normal people don't. And I'm so glad because you didn't say it, but I think you did too. It seems like as you were coming up, you knew who the other guys in your, as you put it, weight class were. And I need to beat them is wrong because you're not rooting for them to fail, but I need to be the valedictorian of the class, so to speak. That's how I've always felt. And so like the person he said to me, he's like, so name a rival. And I said really the most ridiculous one because this person has almost a universal approval rating. But I said Mina Kimes. I was like, she's my age. Everyone thinks she's super smart. She can talk about everything. She's my rival. I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, it just is. Like, I hope she does well, but I need to do better. I was like, this is just how my brain works. And so, yes, and again, I'm not speaking for Tom because I don't know him at all. You know him somewhat. I don't know him at all. But I would imagine Tom looks at other broadcasters now as his rivals. Like I need to be the best, which is why the other thing, and I did say this to you, I think, when Tom was on with you.
All right, the 82-game NBA preseason is in the books now. It's time for real basketball. The playoffs. Don't miss out any of the playoff action. DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered. Same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. All you have to do, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You know the drill. Takes about 90 seconds. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Put in the code COLIN, COLIN. New customers bet $5. That's it, $5 to get $200 in bonus bets, and you get it instantly. You can't lose. Code is Colin, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
You asked him about Patrick, and it was an unbelievable answer, which is he was super complimentary, and then he was like, and, anybody who can get to 7 Super Bowls, I'd tip my cap to him. And it was, to me, a very intentional kind of setting of the ground rules. Like, oh, yeah, anybody can say he's going to be the GOAT. No problem at all. But just so we're clear, if he doesn't get to 7 Super Bowls, it's not a conversation. Like, I don't want to hear about MVPs and I don't want to hear about yards. I think he is competitive in everything. And it's like, I'm the greatest football player ever. And this whole idea that this guy might be better than me one day, okay, sure, but don't you come to me with his yards and touchdowns and MVPs if he only has 5 measly Super Bowls, because the barrier to entry is 7. And I think I respect that. I think that's cool.
So I was thinking about this. I think about this a lot because I do criticize athletes at times about how remarkable athletes are. So if you look at the history of comedy, you get to be the funniest guy in the world for about 3 to 5 years. Ben Stiller, Jim Carrey, there was Drew Carey 25 years ago. Mike
By the
Myers.
way, you're very charitable to include Ben Stiller on the funniest guy in the world list.
Well,
He's pretty good. Pretty good, but go ahead. Maybe he's a friend. I don't know who you're having drinks with, but go ahead.
So if you go look at, Chris Rock,
yes,
Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, where you're
Chappelle.
sort of
yeah, those guys.
Chappelle. Yeah. So, and then it's very hard to be as funny because your life experience changes dramatically because there's so much money in movies and production.
That's
when
right.
you get
Yeah,
big.
of course.
Hip hop stars similarly. First couple albums can be fantastic, and then the material changes.
Yeah.
Athletes, what's really amazing is athletes are almost the opposite. Mahomes is better since he's been paid. LeBron was better when he was paid. Is that athletes, unlike other entertainers, often feel a guilt or a pressure to elevate their greatness when they're paid. It's very rare when you look at athletes, they get paid, and I'm sure it happens.
But not to the great ones. That's the difference between the great ones and everyone else. Because I think that when you talk about getting paid, but I think that at every step of your athletic journey, there has been a getting paid, but not actually money moment where you could relax. You know what I mean? The kid who, when he makes varsity as a freshman, takes his foot off the gas, doesn't get the college scholarship. And the kid who, when he goes to college, is a starter early on and takes his foot off the gas, doesn't make the league. So it almost, you know what I mean? It slowly but surely weeds those people out because it's such a finite number and there's always a new crop of people coming for those jobs.
Also, is that in hip hop, when you win, you're worshiped by everybody. In comedy, when you're the king of laughs, you are worshiped by everybody. In sports, when you win, most of the league hates you. So in sports, greatness does not equal worship outside of your town. It equals kind of a villain, kind of a target. And that's why music critics tend to be too soft, and movie critics are, they're too in bed with them. Music and movie critics and Hollywood. When's the last really tough reporter that Hollywood had? They don't. So it goes to your head. In music, it doesn't work that way. But the media in sports kicks the shit out of you. Once you're great, it's like, well, you weren't good last week against Cleveland.
Also, we don't.
And there's a healthy accountability that doesn't exist in comedy, movies, music. This accountability, standings, criticism that I think actually it's like being tough on your kids. It builds character.
So I think you might have just solved, might not be the right word, but you just said something that really crystallized something for me. Okay. We might have just I feel like this is a real thing that just happened. Because you're talking about the difference between athletes and artists.
Yeah.
And I'm really not trying to be unfair or take a shot. But there are 2 specific NBA players that I think, as great as they are, have markedly underachieved their talent and ability, even though they are, one of them's one of the 20 greatest players ever, and one of them is one of the 10 most skilled players ever. And I think both of them view themselves more artist than athlete. And those 2 guys are Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And I think a lot of what has worked against them and a lot of what they have pushed against is that they are covered like they're athletes and not like they're artists. That it is a lot of criticism and a lot of why did you do this and a lot of but you didn't do that and comparative stuff that athletes are used to. But they're like, we're fucking artists, man. I am out here painting a picture and you're asking me these questions. It's like, just appreciate the art. Meanwhile, other folks who look at themselves as, I don't want to say hired guns, but we are in competition and we are here to win and to do what we have to do, haven't been as bothered by the media criticism. But it does, KD and Kyrie, who, and again, Kyrie, to his credit, has been unbelievable this year. And KD, post Achilles, is the best Achilles recovery in sports history. So I'm not trying to be unfair. It really is. I'm not trying to be unfair, and I'm not trying to take a shot. But they really seem to both struggle with the way they are covered by the media. And what you just described about how artists, musicians, or actors, or comedians are covered by the media is different than how we do athletes. We don't do, when a movie, when there is a huge movie release weekend, when Barbie and Oppenheimer come out the same weekend, there were no articles written like, well, fucking Oppenheimer, how'd you not win that? People are just like, this was awesome. This was even more awesome. These are both great. Like it, and so that I think there is something there, and maybe I didn't describe it exactly right, but about the difference between how athletes and artists are discussed and whether or not you consider yourself an athlete or an artist and how you want to then be discussed and how you feel you should be discussed.
I also think basketball more than any sport, and soccer has some of this as well. I've always compared basketball to international soccer. Messi is an artist. Ronaldo is an artist. Kevin Durant's an artist. Tom Brady's a football player, right? Like Mike Trout's a baseball player.
Yeah, I don't think LeBron's an artist.
No, he's more compartmentalized and strategic. Artists aren't. They kind of hear. I mean, very much LeBron's a stacker, compartmentalize, work on this part of the game, solve this part. Kevin Durant's not looking to solve. Kyrie Irving's not looking to solve parts of their game. They're looking to paint their most beautiful picture. Kyrie had it the other night with that layup over 3 Clippers.
Yes, exactly right. Like that kind, even though that kind of was. And there is something beautiful about this and honorable about it, where it's like that Kyrie has worked for, he's 32, so call it 25 years on every little bit of his ability in order to pull off that one moment. And I know he's obviously done way more than that, but I'm saying like that was a physics and basketball impossibility until we saw
incredible. It was his Mona Lisa.
Yes,
it was his,
exactly right. It was, and it was like, oh, you are probably literally the only human being who's ever lived who could do that. Like, I believe that. I really believe that.
Yeah.
And I think for Kyrie, he's like, and God damn it, you guys still like, do you not see it? Like, do you not understand? But because it's sports, we're like, yeah, but you lost and you haven't been in the finals in 8 years because it's sports. And so, yeah, I do think I want to think about this more because you said it in real time. But I do think there is something really to that. And I think I'm going to start like looking at, because another guy who I think was, as much as you can be in football, closer to artist than athlete, is my pal Odell. I think there was a lot of look at this show I am putting on. Look at what I can do that I have worked on and honed, and the beauty of it. And then, but he's also a guy who never felt he was given a fair shake by the media. You know what I mean? Who never felt it was that he was covered fairly.
Yeah, I think, and I think about that a lot with basketball. It's a canvas.
Yeah.
There are players, Michael had some kind of a almost mechanical mid-range.
Yeah.
Michael scored most of his points on 2 to 3 moves. Kobe was more artist. He had a side of the key he liked. But Michael and Kobe both. Michael would do these flips over his head or the switch hands. But Michael really scored. His game was not mechanical's the wrong word.
Strategic.
It was really strategic. It was really efficient. It was really remarkable. And Michael would just go back to what he did over and over. By the way, I would compare Michael to Mahomes. There is absolute artistry. But Mahomes is better today than 4 years ago for the same reason Michael was better his second three-peat than his first, is that he took the layups. And he had great discretion on use of energy. Like Michael knew, hold it off. He really it's almost like a kid. When kids are 8, they have a biting stage. They have a punch the sister stage. It's all inappropriate, but they have so much energy they can't control themselves. Michael came into the league. He could have scored 60 a night. He wanted to, I always call it, you have the show off stage, the title stage, and the mogul stage. And you can't stop it. LeBron used to chase people down on Tuesday games in Denver and block a ball off the backboard. It meant nothing.
Correct.
It was the show off stage. Look at my gifts. But Michaels and Mahomes now take the layups. They conserve energy. Like Patrick could run all the time.
It's always
interesting. He runs on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 in the fourth quarter. He could do that all game.
So that is, and I know we're going long, so we can wrap but I do wonder, of all the things that people could learn from Mahomes, I don't know why more quarterbacks haven't copied his situational running. You might not be able to listen, the kid played baseball. His dad was a baseball player, the arm angles. Or, there's only probably 5 quarterbacks in the league, if that, who can throw it as far as him. He has I don't remember the word for it. It's like something, it's not photographic. It's like didactic, I think, memory as far as like his ability to, there's certain things. But what is copyable is the understanding of the riskiest thing I can possibly do is run. It is also wildly effective, and I am going to recognize that both of those things are true. And so I am basically never going to do it on 1st or 2nd down. And I am not even going to do it on 3rd down if it's early in the game in the regular season. But that then also means teams are slightly less prepared for it when I do it. And I am more 100%, or even 2 years ago when he had the bad ankle, I have a couple bursts in me to make sure I get where I need to get to. And it just seems like, because I think Mahomes is a good athlete. Obviously, he's a good athlete, but I'm saying I think he is a better athlete than people think because he's never caught, man. When is the last time Mahomes chose to run in a big spot and didn't get where he was trying to get to? Now if he ran all the time, it would happen all the time. And maybe Josh Allen's a unique case because he's bigger than everybody, so he can deal with it. But I just think more of those guys. I also think that, I was skeptical of Jaden Daniels because he's 190 pounds, 195 pounds. I also think there is something to that picture of Mahomes with his shirt off, where it's like, oh, that's actually what your quarterback should look like. Have a little extra, and I understand Brady in his later years looked more chiseled, but
he's much more chiseled now than he was as a player.
Correct, exactly right. It's like, no, I'm going to have muscle underneath a layer of protection almost. You know what I mean? And I think that is, I think that's smart. Like, I think that
Trent Dilfer called it pudding.
Yeah.
He said, like, Brock Heward's a friend of mine. Brock couldn't put on weight.
Yeah.
And he's like, skinny quarterbacks, like Matt Ryan tried to put on weight.
And you know who had it too was
Yeah.
Peyton. Peyton,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Peyton if you ever seen Peyton in person, you realize how big these damn quarterbacks are. But Peyton, when he was playing, wasn't like, like bodybuilder type. He had a layer of protection. And so,
well, yeah. And it also, what matters to you, I said this, I called an NFL head coach on Will Levis's combine when he was wearing a shirtless, ripped. It was very Brady Quinn. And I said, I'm out on him. And he goes, Colin, this is an NFL head coach, successful coach. He said, Colin, it was the talk of a road trip me and the GM went on recently.
Well,
that was the talk of the road. He cares deeply about his girlfriend was beautiful. He's a good-looking guy, big man on campus in Kentucky, a basketball school. He's the football star. Will Levis's, I'm going to show you my build. Literally, a successful GM and coach said they went on a drive, and it was the topic of conversation. Like, he's got the wrong priorities.
On that note, and we can, leave it at this. I am shocked. So I don't know if you saw this reporting, but Spencer Rattler evidently was on a Netflix doc 6 years ago when he was in high school. Did you see any of this, Colin?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So there was LeBron's company produced a Netflix documentary called QB1. And it was basically they followed around. I didn't see it. Some top high school quarterback prospects on their journey. You know what I mean? Like, what's it like to be one of the top prospects in America as a 16-year-old? 16. And evidently Spencer Rattler was a real dick as a kid. Was mean to his backup quarterback, was a bit of a bully, was kind of like your stereotypical mean, popular jock. And Ian Rappaport reported that multiple teams brought it up to him before the draft. Like, and it's like, dude, this guy was literally 16 years old. Like, I don't know, man. Like, please don't use against me at a job interview how I treated people. Like, come on. And so here's why I bring that up. I don't even care about Spencer Rattler in that regard. I am shocked no one has talked about what Shedeur Sanders and, to be fair, Dion have been doing these last couple days, just punching down at guys that left the school. And if you're Dion, and I have massive respect for Dion in general, but if you're Dion, it's like, man, this guy was one of your players. And you're like, where are your stats at? Like, you are one of the most famous athlete coaches in America. And this is a 20-year-old. Like, that doesn't seem right. But then Shedeur, like, buddy, people are talking about you as the number one pick of the draft. And you're on Twitter just shit-talking guys. Like, I can't imagine that's not going to be a problem in a year. I just can't.
Oh, no. It's already being discussed. Yeah. It's absolutely being discussed in the league. It's not a good look
That's
at
what
all.
I think. I think, like, listen, any position other than quarterback, I don't think people would care. Travis Hunter, who's going to be a top 10 pick on Colorado.
I almost like it from an edge rusher. I want you to be obnoxious.
I mean, there's certainly a corner. Like, there are certain spots, you know what I mean? Like, Travis Hunter, you can play corner or wide receiver. It's like, oh, okay, the guy's a little out of his mind. You know what I mean? Maybe, talks in the third person. Great. Love it. I've actually seen that archetype go to the Hall of Fame. Fair or not. And again, I'm not even saying it's right. What I am saying is, if Spencer Rattler can fall a full round, as Rappaport was talking about, because of how he acted as a junior in high school, then what are these same teams going to be saying about someone who knows they're a potential top 10 pick in 12 months? It just seems wild.
Nick, it's a glaring lack of self-awareness. It's really bad. It's being discussed. And I think it's the difference between going 1 and 15.
That's what I mean. So that's what I'm talking about. And I want to be very clear here, because I'm not trying to be the old man yelling at the cloud. I'm not even arguing that one should care about this at all. I'm saying all of NFL history tells me a lot of teams do. A lot of teams 100%
Yep.
do care about this, and it just seems risky. And the difference, by the way, between going 1 and going 15, it's not just I don't even care about the dollar amount of the first contract, but it does have a lot to do with how, if you're not good early, how much margin of error do you get? It's a hell of a lot easier to move off from Kenny Pickett at 15 or Mac Jones at 15 than it is from a number 1 pick. You know what I mean? Somebody. And so I just find that a little odd.
Yeah.
A little odd.
Yeah. It hasn't made the show because the NBA playoffs have been so good and the NFL so big, but it is something I've noticed and thought,
it's funny. It hadn't made our show either, but today I mentioned it during commercial break. I'm like, and this is going to sound silly. I was like, I think what I said was, I think we're 2 tweets away from this being a topic. Like 2 more tweets, and I think it's enough for us to put it in the show. Yeah, I do.
Nick Wright, as always, money. Thanks,
Absolutely.
buddy.
Great time. Talk to you later.